Hello everyone and welcome to this Global Policy Dialogue, Indigenous and Youth Solutions for Clean Water, hosted by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, also known as UN DESA. My name's Claire Forestier and I'm going to be the moderator for today's event. And it's my real pleasure to be with you for the next 90 minutes to guide this really important discussion on Sustainable Development Goal 6, which is clean water and sanitation. Without a functioning, resilient water cycle, human health and the environment are really threatened, and a sustainable, equitable future like the one envisioned in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development will remain out of reach. Now, we also want to highlight today the intersectionality of the issues that Indigenous peoples and the youth face when it comes to clean water. We'll discuss the special challenges that they do face, as well as showcase some really innovative solutions to the water crisis. Now, the event today is happening less than 2 weeks before the start of the UN Water Conference, which takes place in New York from the 22nd to the 24th of March. And there, governments and other stakeholders will have a really decisive opportunity to take action to protect water resources and ensure that they can be accessed by all. Before we continue, I'd really like to thank the UN Peace and Development Trust Fund who've made this event possible. And I'm now going to share some practical tips for the session. So multilingual captions are available in Zoom. You just click more at the bottom of your screen and then you select captions and you will be able to choose what language you want to see the captions in. We'd like to encourage you today to really spread the word on what you're hearing on social media using the hashtag Future of the World. And we also really encourage you to join in the discussion, send us your questions, and of course, vote up other people's questions as well. And we're going to be using the interactive Slido tool today. So to see the polls and to ask your questions on Slido, just scan the QR code on the screen, or if you prefer, you can just go to slido.com and insert the hashtag Future of the World code, which is displayed on the bottom center of your screen. So that's the housekeeping done. I'd now like to start by using the Slido poll to ask you, our audience, a question. So the question for you today is, what do you think is the biggest stress on water supplies today? So is it agriculture, industry? Is it climate change, poor water management, population growth, or something else? So I'll give you a minute to vote and get familiar with Slido if you've not used it before. And while we do that, let's just check out this really stunning video from UN Water on the upcoming occasion of World Water Day. It's the story of a small hummingbird choosing to be a change maker in the big world, and it comes from the Quechua people in Peru. So let's look at it now. Wonderful. What an amazing way to start our conversation, relating in part to Indigenous peoples. Now, let's take a look at the poll and see what you've all said. So 42% of you coming in there with poor water management as the reason for the biggest stress on the water supply today, followed by agricultural industry at 27% and climate change at 23%. Very interesting. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining in there and sharing your opinions. So now let's move on to our first discussion section. And this one is on improving access to WASH, WASH being the shorthand for water, sanitation and hygiene. Now, billions of people around the world have no access to WASH, which is a violation of their human rights, apologies. And I'd like to poll you all again before introducing our guests. What do you think we need most to make more progress on WASH? Is it more funds? Is it more political will, prioritization of the issue, or something else? So whilst you all vote on that on your Slido page, I'm really excited now to introduce the 4 speakers that we have with us for our discussion on improving access to WASH. So I'm going to welcome them to join me now. First of all, we have Roba Aldaour, who's a WASH program manager at Oxfam, and she's joining us today from Palestine. Makasha Looking Horse, who's the youth lead coordinator for the Oneganos, an Indigenous water research program led by McMaster University in Canada. She's also Mohawk and Lakota from the 6 nations of the Grand River Territory. So welcome, Roba and Makasha. And then we're also joined by Noémie Plumier, who is an analyst from Human Right to Water. She's joining us from France today. And we also have Afolayan Jewson Samuel, who's a doctoral researcher at Nottingham Trent University in the UK, and he's also a facilitator at the World Youth Parliament for Water, and he's obviously originally from Nigeria. So thank you very much for being here, all of you. Now, before we start, I just want to have a quick look at the answers that we've come up for in the poll. So let's have a look at that. So it's pretty neck and neck between more political will and prioritization of the issue. So that's really interesting, isn't it? 48% for more political will, prioritization coming in at 44%. So let's see what we talk about in this panel, we'll see how that relates to it. So I'm going to start with you first, Roba. So tell us a little bit about the challenges that persist for many people who don't have secure access to water, sanitation and hygiene.
Hi, everybody. Actually, there are many challenges that faced by people who didn't have access to water, sanitation, and hygiene. And the most significant challenges are the health risks related to spreading of waterborne disease such as cholera, diarrhea, and typhoid. As you know, this is the most spread among children, young children under 5, in addition to the people with weakened immune system. And that's already affect directly the economic burden, because lack of access to wash services create an economic burden for individuals and communities. Illnesses caused by waterborne disease lead to lost income, increased healthcare costs, and reduced the productivity. Additionally, when you talk about gender inequality, women and girls are often the most affected groups by lack of access to wash services. And this is form a burden on collecting water and caring of sick family members based on their capacity. Also, there's limiting their opportunities for reducing the economic, for education and economic empowerment. And for the environmental impacts, it is also a main focused issues. When you talk about the lack of proper sanitation facilities, human waste is often disposed to the open areas, so contaminating water sources and damaging the environment. Actually, when you're talking to children, illness children without access to wash services, they are more likely to missing school and missing the education opportunities that may affect their future perspectives. And finally, I think the most critical is dignity and privacy of people. Lack of sanitation and basic sanitation facilities as a basic needs in the human rights lead to loss of dignity and privacy, and particularly for women and girls. And so these challenges highlight the urgent need to ensure that everyone have safe access to water services under the war.
Thank you, Robert. I mean, so many challenges, and it's so widespread, the impact. Noémie, in your work, you make the link there between water and human rights that Robert mentioned. What can you tell us about that? And also, I just wanted to ask you about the campaign, because you were behind that video that we just saw, weren't you? Or you were working with that campaign.
Yes, it's not only me. There's an amazing team at UN Water, the technical unit, and also the other co-coordinator in the task force of World Water Day and World Toilet Day. Please, let's not forget about it. 19th of November, because they go together, especially in this campaign to accelerate change and achieve the SDG 6. So yes, we were the World Youth Parliament for Water and Human Rights to Water as part of the task force, but really the World Youth Parliament for Water was co-coordinator of this campaign this year, and I think this is already a really positive fact to mention that a youth organization joined next to UNESCO, WHO, and as well Aquafed on this multi-stakeholder campaign for the grand public to talk about WASH, of course, and on World Water Day. So yeah, thank you for asking. We are very proud, and this year particularly stressed on the fact that even though the high-level conference that we all know, the UN Water Conference, is happening, everyone can take part, so every drop is important, and anyone can contribute to solve the water and sanitation crisis. So please join the website of World Water Day and also register your commitment.
Thank you so much.
That's for the part of the the campaign. I can continue if you would like with the other part of your question.
Yes, please.
So at the Human Right to Water, we actually focus on the implementation, of course, and the monitoring of the human right to water on state level. So as some of you may know, there are key elements on the right to water and sanitation that were stated in the general comment number 15 of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, as well as the special reporter on the human right to safe drinking water, which is the criteria of availability, accessibility, affordability, quality and safety, as well as acceptability, and also the known principle, the 5 principles, of non-discrimination and equity, public participation and inclusivity, access to information and transparency, and accountability and access to justice and sustainability. So in our work, we, with the human rights-based approach, we collaborate with some development bank, governments, NGOs, civil society on a methodology to really assess how on ground the human right to water and sanitation is recognized, right? So first of all, we start with a country legal mapping. So it's basically start to see if even the right to water and sanitation is mentioned in the Constitution. And then afterwards, we look at it more focusing on gender sensitive or marginalized group laws or implementation on national plans. And after this, we propose them and we recommend them to target some right order more specifically than others, depending on the obstacles that they have to face. It's in always in the local context. So it's really it's never a general recommendation. So yeah, that's it, a little bit of what we do. I could talk about it way more, but I recommend you to join the resource link of Human Right to Water on the Human Rights-Based Approach Manual, and you will find a lot of way on holding accountable your government or even local government, and on all different criteria of human right to water.
Thank you. Thank you, Naomi. And we can feel your passion there coming through, and also what a complicated job it is to get all of it going, that the whole process to kind of talk about it within each individual government. Thank you so much. So now let's talk about the specific challenges for youth and Indigenous people. So Afolayan, what are the obstacles that young people face?
Thank you very much, Claire. I would say there are scores of them, but then to be very specific, I would speak under two broad headings, which are some that are environmental and those that has to do with the system. Like Robert said when she was speaking, she mentioned some very important components, like in our world today, we have increasing pollution, climate reality, megacities and all, even within the developing countries. And this poses a threat not just to the life of the youth, but also the resource that they need in some of their social enterprise. And I say this because if you look at the recent statistics, there are hundreds of youth that are now participating in water-dependent sectors such as agriculture. And this reality affects how they progress in their niche of social enterprise. And to complement that, I also want to establish that working within the World Youth Parliament for Water, we have recognized a component that has been ignored for quite a while, and this is the fact that there are existing Indigenous youth-led enterprises and social innovations that have significant and translational impacts in addressing basic water issues at the grassroots and the local communities. And this we found out working with different youth across different regions of the world. We realized that there are currently not so much existing platforms that are made to harness these potentials, which in some ways has led to the discouragement of some of these youth. To also build on that, there are government systems and policies today that are quite resistant to incorporating youth into the decision-making process and policy planning. And because of this, some of the policies that are churned out by government, we see that it is not reflective of the reality of the youth and those of the Indigenous people. And the Indigenous people, these are people who have their own way of life, their traditional beliefs and sociocultural way of doing things. And we say that until there is an hybridized system where their traditional way of doing things is incorporated into the democratic solutions that are being offered to them, we say that there would be like some sort of conflict, which would make there to be a continuous negation of the rights of the Indigenous people and those of the youth. So I over the past couple of weeks working with different people, these are some of the concepts that we have identified, and to ensure that there is availability of water for all, which is the core focus of the SDGs, we must ensure that the Indigenous people, their rights are acknowledged as well as their ideas. The traditional institutions and the democratic system are not at conflict. We should establish a collaborative model where both could be incorporated to maximize the ideas that exist. And for the youth, we should acknowledge their ingenuity and creativity, and also realize that whatever it is that the youth are bringing to the desk, it is because water issues does not just affect their today, but also play significant role in their future as well. So yeah, I will draw the curtain, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Makasha, then, in your experience, what are other challenges that you see facing Indigenous peoples, and also why is improved access to adequate water services so essential?
Well, I've been working on Yonegino's water research project for the last 4 years, and we discovered a lot of things that we have never really, that I never would have thought that we would discover, or that I knew that was happening within my community. So I come from the community of Six Nations, and we are surrounded by big cities, and we're right by the Grand River and the Five Finger Great Lakes, which is the third largest water body of water in the world. And just within 150 years, that freshwater body is very contaminated. With the study that we've done, water testing within our community, we found out that there's numerous contaminants coming out of our taps. We found out that there's a lot of homes within Six Nations, which is the largest populated reserve within Canada, that have no access to clean drinking water and no running water within their households. And we are surrounded by big cities that have no problem having access to clean drinking water, like Toronto, Hamilton, and everywhere that's like a drive of 30 minutes off of the reserve. They have no issue of having access of clean drinking water, and we have a lot of contaminants. We work with a birthing center, and they reported that they have a lot of issues with aftercare and high infection rates, and a lot of children have a lot of skin issues with rashes, and because they have to use their water that may be contaminated. And so a large portion of Six Nations actually pays around $180 bi-weekly or weekly, depending on how large their families are, for fresh or for clean water to be trucked in, and so that they could use that. And there have been really sad stories about like mothers who have to truck in their water, and they also have to take care of that, so it's just a larger burden. And we did a study that that women think about access to clean water 8 times a day. And so the health study came out that the stressors with the issues of access to clean water are tremendous on the youth mental health and mother's mental health. And ecological grief has been a huge thing within our community, because they see that our water is extremely contaminated within our taps, but also within surface water like our creeks and our rivers. And this past summer, recently, we did a 2-week paddle on our Grand River, and I vividly seen that the water was super clean upstream, and very, very dirty where we are, and which is at the bottom of the river towards the end. And so there's a lot of contaminants that are just held up, and sediment that is held up within our part of the Grand River. And that mainly is because of all of the dams, and the water is not able to flush itself out. And we have a water treatment plant within our reserve, but only 10% of our community is hooked up to the water treatment plant because there's lack of access to funding for the piping from the water treatment plant to the homes. And even if there's a water pipeline going past your driveway, you still have to pay like $15,000 upwards to around that amount to have your home hooked up to the clean water pipe. pipeline that's going across your driveway. And so there's a lot of issues, and a lot of them are infrastructure issues. And so they don't really go by boil water advisories, which is what Canada measures the water contaminants by. And so even though we have a lot of issues within Six Nations, we still don't have a boil water advisory, so that cuts off a lot of access to different water funds. And yeah, that's how our community is affected in a large way. What I have been, my efforts not solely, but my efforts in my community has been protecting the aquifer water that we have, because it's the only source of clean water that we have left. And I have been fighting big corporations to stop them from extracting our aquifer source water, because they have been extracting it without our consent. So they have not consented with Indigenous peoples, our community.
Can we come to that in a minute with when we talk about some of the examples of water protection? Because I think, you painted there a really stark picture of the issue facing your community, facing Six Nations. And I think, many of us listening, we will have been really, you did some brilliant descriptions there of it, and you're traveling out on your canoe and the experiences that you're having. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Yesterday was International Women's Day, so gender equality and bridging the gender gap is on our minds, and it's in the news. And obviously you've mentioned it yourself there, Makasha, 8 times a day women are considering that. How are they going to get clean water? And I know it's something that you've been talking about, Naomi, and also Roba, you mentioned it. So what about special considerations for women and girls' access to wash? If I maybe come to you, Naomi, first.
Well, there's a lot to do. If you've been on social media yesterday, we still need a day. We are half of the population. Secretary General said that we will achieve gender equality in 300 years. So there's a lot to do, and especially considering the wash journey of young female and the taboo around it. The taboo as well, or as Makasha rightly mentioned, the invisible one as well, that is the quality. The quality of water we don't see. Some people are not even aware about, because there's no proper monitoring, because there's no proper access to the information, as well as just simply as the language barrier sometimes, or thinking about the person with disabilities, for example, suffering of visual impair. If they don't see, how do they access those information? So, and I would say as a female, we also face multiple, it's multiple layer, you can be, unfortunately, a female disabled person, and then you will have the double struggle, and then you add on. And yes, so it is really important. The most important is that we talk about it, and that's especially on the law perspective as well, that female and young person, because we're talking here as well of youth, of course, and female young Indigenous representative as well, in the decision-making processes. So not being afraid as well to go into politics, because where are the laws being drafted? If you're a law representative, if you are a deputy, if you are in your local government. So it is also this challenge that goes in there, gender inequality in representation, and as well as youth representation and Indigenous representation. We all face the same struggle at the end of the day. So that's why we need to monitor and fix those goals and really focus on those objectives, in my opinion. And the effort needs to be like the disaggregated data needs to be looking at those particular points when we monitor, when we think about financing projects, when we think about governance, it's at all the different stages that this needs to be in the heart. If we want to reach everyone, like the leaving no one behind, you need to start to also think about then and put in the center on the human rights based approach, but also a people centered approach. Who are we missing then from the conversation? It's as simple as that. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Robert, do you have anything to add there?
I think from a WASH programming perspective, there is a specific challenges when to come to access to water, sanitation, and hygiene for women. Women mainly faced gender-based violence when the WASH interventions designed not appropriately to considering their needs. Women also are vulnerable in terms of menstrual hygiene management. So I think when we talk about a woman in WASH, we talk about two things. The main thing is how we can considering the woman needs in accessing to water, sanitation, and hygiene. And the second thing is how we make the woman as a representative to their to the other woman actual needs. How we can make women take decisions related to their needs in terms of WASH. So this is this is a big question for women, especially for women leaders, women. So under WASH program designing, it's essential to involve women and girls in the design during the need assessment, understanding their specific needs and engaging them in the implementation and monitoring for WASH programming. And this is through providing gender-specific WASH facilities. For example, here in Palestine, we used to engage women in choosing the location of the public filling points for drinking water to ensure that women can't faced by can't exposed to gender GBV stress. Also, we are ensuring that in promoting menstrual hygiene management during the WASH actions in schools and at household levels. And finally, by promoting gender equality in the WASH services that mainly affect the overall public health situation. In such a context, we can improve the health, well-being, and social economic opportunities for women and girls.
Thank you, Roba. So we're going to move on now to, it's my favorite part of these policy dialogues because we hear about the good solutions for some of the world's really big problems. And these can be new innovations. And especially, I think in the case of Indigenous peoples, they can be how ancient ways of living that are being used that we might actually be able to all scale up to improve our water supplies. So I'm going to start with you, Makasha, if I may. Could you give us an example of water protection that you can share with us? Is there an example you can share with us?
Yeah, so water protection, when I think about water protection, I think about all of the efforts that we have done since for the last 150 years. I think about all of the efforts that we tried to stop any kind of development, any kind of a pipeline, and mainly that's Indigenous peoples' work, and we have done it for a very, very long time. And 84% of Indigenous peoples protect 84% of the world's biodiversity. And so putting Indigenous peoples and prioritizing Indigenous peoples is essentially protecting of the 84% of the planet's biodiversity. And so I know that we have done this a very, very long time, and that's really about stopping pollution, and protecting our land, but also our waterways, especially right now. I think right now is really, really important to start protecting the waterways and enforcing our treaty rights and our like two-row wampums and our dish with one spoon treaties that we have made with Canada, and enforcing our rights and our original agreements that we have all made, and that's including our waterways and our territory. And so that's the one way that I think that we could prioritize Indigenous peoples, is looking at the original agreements, or seeing asking the Indigenous peoples, or making space for them to have say or over like the research or the waterways, and what ways are the best ways to protect those waterways. And I know that there's a lot of different plants that they're able to plant along the waterways to clean out the pollution. I know that having traditional knowledge and having the waters flow freely and not having any dams, that's one way that we were taught to take care of the waters, is making sure that they flow freely. And also one way that I have been working is enforcing our treaties, like our Nanfan Treaty, to protect our waterways, like our aquifer. And so the aquifer water is very, very precious, and that can come from our teachings, that this water is very, very healthy, and it carries nutrients and carries nutrients to our bodies, and it has a lot of healthy minerals, and so we have to protect that water. And I think that's the one way that we can enforce, is just making space for Indigenous peoples, and realizing our agreements and our treaties.
Thank you, Makasha. So some ideas there for what's going on with the Six Nations and how they are trying to protect the water. Can I come to you now, Afolayan, and maybe you could share an example of water protection with us?
Yeah, thank you very much. Water protection has a lot to do with the orientation of the people, especially those that are the grassroots and the local communities. So I am of the opinion that when there is an extended level of education, especially the one driven by the core components of the grassroots, which are the youths, it will create a system where we have an educated population that responds to water in the best way as expected. And looking at it in the long term, we'll say there is a need to begin to incorporate this education into the core curricula, especially with children. And this would help sustain a model where the response to water would be seen beyond just the resource, but one which is precious and should be treasured. I give an example. Growing up as a child in Nigeria, there is usually this concept that when you throw something into a body of water, then the water throws that back at you. We were all scared because we don't want a situation where that happens to us. Well, I've grown up to know that that is not real, but it helped in some ways to prevent us from participating in some sort of environmental pollution. So when we extend this level of knowledge, I mean the ideal ones, it goes a long way in help protecting the water, both on the long term and on the short term. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I liked that story. That was a good story, and I see what you mean. It has benefits, but yes, also some negative sides to it. Thank you very much. I'm going to come to you very quickly, Naomi and Robert, to see if you want to add anything there on some examples of water protection. And then what we'll do is, for the last few minutes, we'll get some questions from the audience. We will have a look at those. So very quickly, Naomi, could you add something there about an example of water protection?
Well, maybe it's not directly linked to our WASH topic, but it is still important. It's that also we need to kind of push our government, especially on transboundary cooperation, which is also part of SDG 6. Because if riparian countries, so states we are part of, are in war already or don't have agreement over the resource of water, it will necessarily impact us and the communities around those rivers, around those aquifers. So yeah, I just wanted to say as well that there is a convention on this, and it's a UNECE water convention on transboundary water, lakes and rivers. And there's still many countries that are not part of it. There are river basin organizations, yes, but they don't necessarily have international agreements, and etc. etc. We don't necessarily need it, but we know it's a mechanism and it's an instrument that hold accountable again and oblige states to fulfill what they have to do, their duty, right? So that would also be something I advocate for, to also ask our government to have a blue peace approach on the management of the water.
Thank you. Robert, could you add something there? Do you want to?
I think yes. I would to highlight one example about protection water when talking about treating wastewater and reusing it for agriculture, especially in the communities that consume more than 50% of the groundwater source for agriculture purposes, for irrigation. So what I would to highlight is such projects of water protection go in parallel by the community and youth-led initiatives, and other side by the government strategies and policies. What I want to mention about is we should have both routes to support each other. Youth should have their right to think about innovative ideas, about innovative solutions for the complex context. And at the same time, policy and governments should give them a space to say about their needs, to say, to suggest their appropriate solutions. In addition, governments should design plans that sustainable financially and institutionally. When you talk about any of the water protection systems in the world, you should talk firstly about how we can operate, how we can maintain, how we can ensure financial sustainability. Yeah, so these are the main challenges of any water protection initiatives under the world, and especially here in Palestine, which make us as a youth are disappointed with all of our initiatives to improve the situation of the water in our countries.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, so we're going to look now at some questions. So the first question I'm sort of seeing up here, which has been upvoted by a few people, is what are the special considerations for clean water in conflict conditions? And I think that was sent in, they've said anonymous, but I think that was sent in from Odessa in the Ukraine. So obviously issues particularly relevant for them there. Oh, no, sorry, that wasn't. Yes, no, it was sent in from Ukraine. So that's obviously a key issue as they are in a conflict there. That's probably a Noemi. I imagine you could answer that.
That's a Noemi question. Yes, it's more on the humanitarian side though, but it's linked to human rights. But we are here in conflict time, so it is the Geneva Convention that you should look at, and the principle of course that protect water, but not only water as a general, the infrastructure such as hospitals, schools, and the protection of civilians at the end of the day. So to not go too political on the subject, I would recommend you to look at the Geneva Water Conventions and also the amazing work of the Geneva Water Hub that drafts several principal guidelines on the topic of water infrastructure in times of conflict, internal conflict or internalized conflict.
Brilliant, thank you. I hope that was a helpful answer. So the next question we've got is from Tak Bahadur Tamang in Kathmandu in Nepal, and he says, what can be the solution to put Indigenous traditional knowledge into mainstream policies and strategies? I mean, if we knew that we'd be able to answer a lot of questions, but does anybody have a comment they might like to make on that? How we could actually do that? There's a little hand there. Afalayan, yes, please answer that one.
Yeah, thank you very much. The first thing to do is, first of all, acknowledge the importance of the indigenous knowledge, and to also accept the fact that it is not in conflict with the central or the democratic knowledge. Once that is established, the appropriate model of engagement could be set up, whereby the people could be called for dialogue, could be called for contributions, could be called for negotiation and inclusion towards forming a policy or a framework that is reflective of their identity or how they want the intervention. And to also add to that, when policies are made, not consulting these individuals or persons, it looks impulsive and sometimes may not even address the main issues that are confronting them locally. So yes, when we acknowledge the fact that their contributions are vital to whatever it is that is being done, then that sets a foundation upon which collaboration could be made that would yield the outcome that is inclusive to the bodies that are responsible for such collaborations.
Thank you very much, Efelan, and thank you very much to Tak Bahadur Tamang and to Boris Babin for your questions as well from the audience. We really appreciate that. That is all we've got time for on this panel. I'd like to say thank you very much to our panel as well for some fantastic insights there and for sharing some stories. We really appreciate it. We're going to now transition to our second discussion. And while we do that, we have another short video to watch. Now, this one is from our hosts, UN DESA, and it's looking towards the upcoming UN Water Conference, which is happening on the 22nd and 24th of March, or 22nd to the 24th of March at the UN headquarters in New York. So let's take a look at that now. I defy you not to be moved by that. It was pretty stirring stuff, and it is exciting to feel that we are in this time when we can make some change, particularly with that conference coming up. So let's just hope that happens. But now let's turn to our second panel, and this is on water for climate resilience and disaster risk reduction. So before we introduce our panel, I'm going to ask you, the audience, another question. How worried are you about water-related disasters like floods, drought, or rising sea levels? straightforward answers here. Are you very worried, a little bit worried, not very worried, or not at all worried? And while you are voting, I'm going to introduce our guests to you. And again, we have some exceptional panelists. We have 5 joining us now. I want to ask everybody, you're going to have to keep your answers brief so we can get through as many of the questions as possible. But let's give a big welcome now to Nahali Anupriya, who is an Associate Programme Management Officer with the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. We're also joined by Jordan Barnoff, who is a Cree woman and advisor to the Vice President of the Métis Nation Saskatchewan in Canada, and I probably said that all terribly wrong. I apologize, Jordan. We're also joined by Piet Kabang Kanabato, who's an associate professor in the Department of Environmental Science at the University of Botswana, and Tero Mustonen, who's an adjunct professor at the University of Eastern Finland, and he's a member of the Snow Change Cooperative, which is an organization dedicated to the advancement of Indigenous cultures and knowledge on the environment, particularly in the Arctic. And finally, but not least, Lani Sinajini, who's an assistant professor in community and regional planning at the University of New Mexico. She is Dine and Filipina, and her home community of Na Nilgene lies in the easternmost area of the Navajo Nation. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today. I'm just going to have a very quick look at the poll before we carry on. So yeah, funnily enough, 79% of people who responded to our poll there are very worried, and only 3% are not at all worried. So that'll be interesting to see how people might feel about that after the rest of our conversation. But I'm going to come to you first, if I may, Nahali, and ask you, would you summarize for us how climate challenge is connected to water? No pressure. If you could do that in 2 minutes, that would be amazing.
Thanks for a super easy question to start us off with. So I think where I'll start is that 75% of all disasters that occur are somehow water related, whether these are floods or drought, whether this is due to coastal erosion and the incursion of water into agricultural lands and salination of groundwater. A lot of what we see being the slow onset and fast onset impacts of water-related hazards really do have effects that are stemming from the climate crisis. I think the relationship between water and climate change is one of the, how should I put this? It's a little bit of a double-edged sword. Because it both presents a huge challenge and a resource that we need to be protecting, a resource that we need to be managing better. And it's also a space that provides a lot of solutions. As we see increases in temperatures, we also need to be better managing irrigation and water use in industry so that we can retain and increase quality of life the world over. So I think there are 2 different kind of spaces that we need to be thinking about when it comes to climate and water. One is this element of risk reduction. How do we reduce the negative impacts of water loss and water damages? And then also, how do we harness this incredible natural resource to ensure that people have access to safe and clean water the world over? So that's my 2-minute summary for you.
Amazing, thank you so much. So now I'd like to dig deeper on how sustainable water management efforts can improve resiliency. So Piet, if I come to you, what are you finding in your research?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think one of the things that I can say in summary, just to summarize some of what I see as the major problems around that issue, is number one, I think we have already touched on it, access to water supply and sanitation is quite key. And then number 2 would be water-related disaster that Nahali has just spoken on. And then you can continue and elaborate the water stress and ecosystem degradation and also water pollution. So for me, those are really the key issues. And until we adopt what is now known globally as integrated water resource management, I think that, to me, that's where the answers lie, because water does not exist in isolation. You see, you talk about the issue of land, sustainability also comes in. You talk about even equity, issues of equity, economic sustainability, and also the social part of water. So I think if we look at water in its own entirety through the integrated water resource management, that's for me really where the answer lies. And just finally, to conclude my statement on that one, is also how we define integrated water resource management. Because to me, that's where you look at the coordinated development and management of water, land, and related resources without even compromising the sustainability of the ecosystem. So I think really that's where we need to go in order to address all these problems.
Okay, thank you. Lani, from your perspective as an expert in hydrology, what would you say?
For which question? I'm sorry.
So well, we're digging into how sustainable water management efforts can improve resiliency. So I just wanted to hear your perspective, because obviously as an expert in hydrology.
Okay, yeah. Well, like, you know, water is connected to other systems that we need to live and to survive. So it's connected to our food systems, our energy systems. And so, you know, recognizing this, you know, and being able to, you know, manage our water more sustainably, we're able to also, you know, connect to our food systems and our energy systems and make sure, you know, we have, you know, those systems are more resilient as well. And then also, you know, the ecosystems that depend on water, if we're able to, you know, make sure that, you know, there's more water available for all these systems and our ecosystems, and, you know, there's just like the different dependencies that we have on ecosystems that could also, you know, make our communities more resilient as well. And, you know, cultures depend on, you know, all these systems as well. So, you know, the natural systems and that are tied to, you know, water and water resources, you know, it'll help us to sustain our culture. So just, you know, just knowing there's more water available, being able to manage water so that there's more water available for all these systems that we need to live, it'll just, yeah, make us, you know, more resilient in all these different fronts.
Thank you. So we've talked already today about, you know, some water management solutions from Indigenous peoples that can be scaled up to aid resilience and disaster risk reduction. So Terry, I'd like to ask you about the Snow Change Cooperative. You know, could you tell us what it does, what solutions to the water crisis you're trying to promote?
Thank you, Claire. Best of greetings from the Boreal village of Selkie. I'm a Finnish person, and I'm currently the chairperson for Snow Change Cooperative, which is registered as a non-profit in Finland. But we have Indigenous and local communities network all through the Arctic and also in the Pacific that are working on exactly this question. We have been around for 23 years, so it's been a little bit more mature organization. A lot of the work that Snow Change did for the first 10 years was trying to highlight the urgency of climate change and water, of course, in the Arctic. But then at some point we started to realize not much is happening and all of these impacts are still going on. And that's why we launched into the landscape rewilding program about 7 years ago, where using Indigenous and, where applicable, local knowledge and latest science, we are restoring rivers, lakes, springs, peatlands, all the water systems in the Arctic that we have in our disposal comprehensively. So one way of summarizing is that we can only match the challenge of climate change and the impacts and build resilience if we embrace completely new ways of doing things, including catchment restoration. So in our mindset, a lake or river really is the guilty party for its problems. The problems are resulting from the catchment area, from the basin, for example, logging industry, mining, partly climate change might be now playing a role. Everybody knows that the Arctic and the Boreal are warming 3 to 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. this will put in conclusion many critically important endemic cold water species, for example, trout, salmon, Arctic char, burbot, and many others on harm's way because the waters are too hot. We have plenty of water, but it's too hot here. And that's why the Sami and other indigenous peoples that are working in snow change and with snow change are trying to restore their waters and of course protect them where possible. And I think we are succeeding only by combining indigenous knowledge and science for this massive task in the Arctic. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing a little bit more about snow change. And Jordan, from your perspective, what could you share with us about what solutions from Indigenous peoples are being used that maybe could be scaled up?
You know, I think that this is a very broad question. Heard from today about people's lives.
We are having problems hearing you, Jordan. I'm not sure. You sound a bit robotic there. I'm wondering if we could maybe fix that, and I will come to Lani and then come back to you. Lani, can I ask you then, the same question really, what management solutions are you coming up with or hearing about that could be scaled up?
Yeah, and I think this has been touched on a bit, in some of the other panel and earlier in this panel, but, recognizing the longstanding relationships that Indigenous peoples have had with the lands that we're connected to, and understanding the years of relationships that we've been on this land comes with a lot of knowledge. I think, there's local solutions tied to that knowledge with that was built up for the hundreds and thousands of years that we've been on our homelands, and so just recognizing and acknowledging that knowledge, and then kind of from a larger scale, focusing more on our relationships to one another as as human beings, and then also focusing on our relationships to our non-human relatives as well, and just seeing each other as relatives will help us to better think more about who needs water for what, and making sure if we're able to just see more of that connection we have with each other, and making sure we can there's enough water for everyone, and for future generations as well, and so I think this has been done in certain places where some communities or some nations recognize or have given personhood rights to certain bodies of water, and so that's recognizing those rivers or those lakes as our relatives, and making sure we treat them in such a way.
I love that. That's a lovely thought. Thank you. Some really interesting ideas there. Jordan, I think you could join us again, which is great. I'd be so sad if we couldn't. Yeah, what could you tell us about here, some management solutions, water management solutions?
I think we can look at it from a pretty basic foundational understanding, and Lani alluded to this and explained it very well. And I think scaling up includes changing the systems that govern us, right? And I'm from Canada. I'm from Northwest Saskatchewan. One of our biggest resource extraction industries is uranium mining, right? And so what comes with that? And kind of the governance system that allows for the extraction and the displacement of people, those have not worked for us. Those are systems that have impacted water without even including water in discussions in some instances, right? So our communities, Indigenous nations around the world, marginalized people, we've had our natural laws. We have our connection to the land and to the water, and we've had that since time immemorial. And I think a natural solution, or an easy solution for the rest of the world, is to catch up to some of these ways of knowing, and our simple concept of interacting, protecting, and including water in every conversation, right? Set a place at the table for water, set a place at the table for the earth, and, you know, include those things as they are living beings, right? And that's how we see them. And Lonnie kind of spoke to this a little bit about personhood for you know, the natural world. And I think that is a very simple, scalable solution to a lot of the issues that we have, especially when we're looking at climate resilience and adaptation solutions, right? It's about protecting our source of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, personhood there for the earth, for the water. I love it, and the idea of there are relations that you guys were talking about there. Thank you so much. So a question now is, how then can young people play a bigger role in water as it relates to climate action? I'm going to come back to you on that, Jordan.
Yeah, I think youth play a massive role, and you know, they've brought solutions to the table in a number of different ways. I'm a part of an Indigenous youth collective called 7Gen, and you know, we've provided the opportunity for young people to really mobilize and put to action their solutions to climate change, right? And a lot of these that they're now putting into place and implementing in their communities are related to water. Every single one of them has a connection and an interaction with water. This food, energy, water nexus that, you know, we sometimes forget to include in the climate conversation is very much at the forefront of youth-led solutions. And you know, I think we can even look at this, and this is just from you know, my realm of understanding, but working with Indigenous youth and being an Indigenous person, you know, we're often asked, well, what are the innovative solutions? And, you know, if you want to talk about innovation in terms of introducing something new, a new concept to, you know, the Western world and mainstream world, I think that includes Indigenous worldview. You know, it's not new, but it's innovative to these systems that have not included and incorporated it in every single way, shape, or form since, you know, since contact. So I think those are definitely, you know, we need to bring youth in, and not just at a youth level. You know, young people, I've had mentors and, you know, the most incredible, like brilliant people I have ever worked with are young people. And, you know, sometimes it gets lost in the youth conversation, and, you know, we need to include all people in these conversations.
So thank you, Jordan. So we're talking there for sort of the North American perspective. If I came to you, Tero, in Finland and in the Arctic, how can young people play a bigger role?
Thanks. One of the programs we have recently started to implement is something called River Guardians. And this is the notion where both in the Finnish boreal villages along River Koitajoki and then up in the Sami area in the Arctic, we have been using some funding and creating mechanisms by which the youth can express themselves on observations, hopes, needs that they have when they go fishing or observe changes related to the environment and waters. One of the other sides of this coin is that many people think of the Arctic with the iconic images like the polar bear and the melting Inuit on an ice floe to be playing on some of those stereotypical questions, and all of them are of course wrong. The Arctic is a homeland, as we heard, and a genuine place where people have been for thousands of years. And that's why one of the most urgent things to do with youth and the waters, in my mind, have to do with how do we convey Indigenous knowledge and cultural knowledge regarding waters in an era of immense cultural change. We have some cases in the Arctic where the youth are only speaking English and the grandmother is speaking, for example, Indigenous language. Therefore, it's not so much regarding the technical solutions that are needed. I'm very concerned in some parts, for example, of European North, where the transfer of knowledge and this worldview that Jordan was talking about and these other forms are rapidly becoming equally critically endangered as ways of knowing, as well as the impacts and species that are being having the burden on these changes. So we should also include a youth program like the River Guardian program, where the youth can express themselves, but also find ways to convey meaning, significance, and the knowledge onwards in their mechanisms, whether it's TikTok or whatnot in these times.
TikTok or whatnot, I feel the same when I see TikTok. Thank you. If I came to you as well on that, Pete, what would you say? How can young people play a bigger role in water and climate action?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think for me, if we want the young people to play an active role, there must be a benefit that they can derive from such activities. So not just, for example, when we are doing research, it's not just research for the sake of doing research, but it's research that will solve problems in the communities. For example, where I am, I'm chairing the Botswana chapter of Global Water Partnership Southern Africa. And I'm working with some relatively young people in one of the catchments and on a climate resilient project. And it is about the communities and to say, young people, what is it that you would like to do in the water space? And they say, no, one thing that we want to do is to make contribution in the agricultural space. So for the funding that we got, we managed to dig them a borehole, and they are setting up, as I speak, they're setting up all the infrastructure for hydroponics, because they chose that they can contribute in that area and begin to look at how water can be used efficiently in systems relating to agriculture. So when they are involved in that, on one hand, they're deriving livelihood, and on the other, they're beginning to be intuitive as they are in research. So I think that has really motivated them, and the community is mobilized because of what they are doing. So let's engage them and let them see the benefit, and that they can be fully mobilized.
It's a very valid point. We have the assumption that all young people are caring about it, but they're not, many of them. It isn't necessarily relevant to all groups of young people. They're not seeing the impact yet. So thank you. That was really interesting. And Nahali, I'd love to get your perspective here on what you think young people could do or how they could play a bigger role.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. I think we've really seen this wonderful trend in the last few years of young people being increasingly engaged in advocacy in the political space and having a bigger and bigger platform. And I think that it's absolutely the right direction. The role of advocacy and activism and the role of policymakers goes hand in hand. You know, we need, as policymakers, you need to know that there is support amongst your population, amongst your people, for more ambitious policies in this area. And we fully recognize that policymakers move a lot slower than most people would like them to. So I think the amount of activism and engagement and political advocacy is only a good thing, because it really does drag the political conversation in the direction that we would like it to flow into. I think Taro's point, though, about this kind of intergenerational dialogue piece, though, is also really important. And I think that's also something that the policy space needs to be a bit more sensitive to. You know, we think about what interests kind of influence where policy lies and where business lies and where developments lie. And that's not always, the same as where, young people, where grassroots level communities would like to see decisions being made, or in the same way that they'd like to see decisions being made. So I think as spaces like this for dialogue, or at United Nations, bringing those wide range of kind of perspectives together in a way that can be, respectful and can encourage greater thought and conversation, and I think greater greater curiosity is very valuable. My only concern on a personal level is that we start running out of time. The amount of time that it takes to truly build that level of understanding and that level of empathy is a long. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes patience. And this is definitely one of the policy areas where that's not something that we have the luxury of. So I think my only sentiment here is be loud, stay loud, and hold your decision makers to account, really.
Thank you. Lani, I haven't spoken to you on this yet. So in your opinion or in your experience, how can young people play a bigger role in the water as it relates to climate action?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of youth, just like learn more about how climate is impacting climate change is impacting, the water resources in their communities or in their region. And so this is, and they've seen, they've experienced the impacts. And so this has spurred them to go into different avenues to become more involved, such as, going into higher education and becoming further experts in water. And then also, becoming involved by becoming leaders in their communities, like either formal or informal, and becoming organizers and also in their community to, find different ways to spread awareness about the water and how climate has been impacting the water and water resources and they're just in their communities in general. But I also think that like the older generations, we have to also make space for the youth to become more involved, whether in like our local governments or regional governments as well. We are in New Mexico. We recently had, or we're in the process of completing a 50-year water plan. And so within this water plan, there have been processes where, we can, where youth have been invited to talk, but I think, this space needs to definitely be opened up a little more to include their voices. Especially because it's the younger generations that will be using the water in 50 years or in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, they're going to be the most impacted. Thank you very much. Well, we're going to try and have a look at some of the questions that the audience have been sending in. So my first question I can see here, I wish I could say your name. It looks amazing. It's from somebody in Hawaii. Yeah, I can't say your name. I'm so sorry, but I think your surname is Kalahiki. How do we ensure Indigenous communities maintain their right to exercise self-determination when it comes to the management of their waterways? So there's a little bit more what we were talking about in the last panel, but I really would love to ask this question because I know lots of people have upvoted it. Who feels equipped to answer that question? Who would like to answer that one? I'm not seeing any of your hands going up, which is terrible. So I'm going to pick on you, Jordan.
Yep, no, I'm happy to answer this one. I think in terms of self-determination, being able to equip communities and inform communities, that is an important part, and that needs to come from the community, right? That needs to being able to mobilize and organize within your own space with your own people, and being able to reach out and look what's happening around the rest of the world, and looking to other Indigenous nations. I've learned so much from the other people on this panel today, and that's a huge not only for empowerment, but for the education piece and the connectivity piece in terms of what are other people doing around the world in terms of, how have governing bodies, all of these different systems that guide us, or, in some cases, oppress us. How do we fight those things? How do we harmonize our actions in a bigger way? And I think that for myself and the work that I do within Canada, it's minimizing this, this facade, this ghost ship of meritocracy, and including people in the conversation. Indigenous people are the first people of the land, and we have the original treaty with the water. We have the original treaty with the four-legged and the winged ones, and that was to protect and honor the earth and the water. And bringing that to mainstream knowledge, and not that it's it's this like conceptual thing out here. It's real. Those are our laws. Those are our governing systems. And, the rest of the world kind of needs to meet us halfway that, these are important pieces of legislation, of governance that need to be included in a real, tangible way.
Thank you. I can see your hand is up, Pete. What would you like to say there? Oh, your sound is off, like me at the beginning.
Sorry. My contribution on this actually was going to be that the good thing about Indigenous knowledge in our communities that they've been doing it actually for many years. And they have developed confidence in what they're doing. They have got self-determination. And it's just that they need to be given space. And such knowledge also should be transferred to the young people. And I would give you an example in the water space is to do with how they are able to detect climate for the next day or for the season, how they are able to divine groundwater, for example. And we see that those things are working. It's just that they need to be infused or mainstreamed in the modern science. But on their own, really, they work, and they have been track records for some of those. And I think they are also playing a very big role in our in information that we seek as a society. So I really say yes, it's a space that they need to be given. The communities have that kind of knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got another question here, which is, it's a tough one to answer, but what actions can be taken against corporations that pollute water and deny centuries-old water rights of Indigenous people? So that's from Johnson Jamant, who's in Trivandrum in India. It's a really difficult one because obviously it's so political, but who would like to answer that? Let's see. Pete, is that something? Oh, Nahali, great.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. I think I just wanted to take the space to also talk a little bit about what our water is presently used for. The large majority of fresh water, especially in the global north, is used for industry. And if it's not used for industry, it's used for agriculture. And if it's used for agriculture, it's used for animal feed. So I think there is this question around lifestyle shift, and there are individual actions that come together to make collective action happen, and there are also policies and regulations that need to be put in place to make sure that we're reflecting the true balance of what the environmental cost is of some of these economic choices. But there is, I think, a shift in the right direction of us being more conscientious around how we're using our individual kind of agency to contribute to greater change. So I think that's perhaps a small amount of optimism that as we encourage greater understanding around how our lives and livelihoods can impact these larger kind of decisions, then change does come. In terms of holding corporations to account, again, I think this comes back to the piece of having regulations and policies in place that truly reflect the real nature of risk and the real kind of costs of the economic decisions that we make. So a huge part of work that the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction does is encouraging governments to put national legislative frameworks in place that mean that the private sector and industry has to properly account for the risks, and if they're not accounting for it, at least disclosing it, so that their consumers and their customers can be more aware of the true costs of the products and the assets that they're consuming. So I think there's definitely this piece to encourage governments and policymakers to to regulate around this space. But that pressure again comes, I think, from the people. But that's my take on it.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you, Lani, within your home community and within the areas that you live in, with the groups of people that you work with, do you feel that the corporations that pollute water and deny centuries-old water rights of Indigenous people, how do you think that's being handled, and what do you think should happen?
Yeah, I come from a community that's called we're within this area called the Greater Chaco region, where we've seen a lot of impacts from oil and gas development in our communities. And, it's been, this oil and gas, a lot of our community members have been involved in, I guess, just trying to spread awareness about the impacts it's had on our water resources, not just from the water that's, mined, or the groundwater that's mined for the extraction of the oil and gas, but, also the potential for pollution of our different, water resources. And oil and gas, in New Mexico is a big source of revenue for our state. And it's also a source of revenue for a lot of like the individual families, where the development is happening. And so I think, I think like the quickest way, to, I guess, counter this development is to, find other sources of revenue for the state and for our home communities. And I think, making more community members and more of our leaders aware of the actual impacts of our water resources on this type of development. And then, how, I think, just having a better understanding of like, the extraction of the water and, how it, what position it puts, future generations in. I think, that might help, our leaders better understand that, a different, something else besides or other sources of revenue are needed.
Thank you, Lani. Thank you. Well, look, we're coming to the end of today's event. So many thanks to Nahali, to Jordan, to Pete, to Tero, and to Lani for the last panel, and obviously our panel beforehand as well. Many thanks. We've had some great discussions, lots of you sharing really amazing insights and expertise. And obviously, thank you to the audience for sending in your questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, but really appreciate them. And obviously, everybody's been having a look at each other's and learning from them. Now, those of you watching on Zoom are going to see an exit survey pop up when you leave the meeting. So please do spare a couple of minutes, if you would, to fill it in, because we really appreciate your feedback. UN DESA is going to be continuing these global policy dialogues all year. So please bookmark un.org/DESA on details for that event. And if you are interested in learning more about water, and of course you are, because you've just sat through this conversation about it, then just another reminder that the UN Water Conference is kicking off on World Water Day on the 22nd of March, and you can watch many sessions and even participate in some hybrid side events. And you can also find out about that, of course, at un.org/DESA, as I just mentioned. And also on World Water Day, a big World Water Development Report is going to be released by UN Water. So make sure you bookmark unwater.org. That leaves me to just thank the panelists one more time, and of course the organisers UN DESA, and to wish you, wherever you are in the world, a really great rest of the day. you.